Vyckie Garrison is a former adherent of the Quiverfull movement, a growing segment of Christian fundamentalists who advocate for biblical patriarchy, prolific motherhood, homeschooling, courtship, and more. She hosts a blog called No Longer Quivering, where escapees from spiritual abuse can speak out about their experiences and recoveries. Today, Vyckie will be telling us about why the Dominionists are going to make us wish that there had been a rapture.
And yes, I'm one of those, was one of those who, if I had been in a situation where it was me or the baby, and actually, you know, I came very close to losing my life on several occasions because I was committed to that pro-life ideal. I have notes, which this is my first time. Usually I just get up and start talking because I know my subject well enough since I lived it for 25 years. That I just rattle. But when Marlo contacted me and asked me to talk at this Eschaton conference, I was like, oh, eschatology, that was my thing. When I was a believer, I was very much interested in end times things. When I first became a Christian, I read Hal Lindsey's Late Great Planet Earth and Satan is Alive and Well on Planet Earth. And I was convinced that Jesus had to return within the next 5 years. And as I was getting more into Bible study and more into Calvinism, more into the fundamentalism, I had a change in which I began to be more postmillennial. And I'm going to explain that as I go through. But actually, and I said, so I'm going to put together a presentation, and I'm actually going to be prepared, and I'm a lot more nervous. And my 16-year-old Hazel, she's taken speech class this semester, and, you know, they always tell you that you need to start out with a joke if you're nervous. And I actually, you know, if you catch me outside of the conference, I actually know a lot of, like, an impressive number of really good jokes, but they're all kind of dirty jokes that don't really fit. So I'm just going to take a minute to imagine that you're all sitting out there in your underwear. That doesn't actually help. Okay, so okay, I'm just going to go. Yes, this is my family. I'd like to introduce you to, up at the top is my oldest daughter, Angel. She's 27. She is in the Navy and stationed in Pensacola, Florida, which is a lot warmer than it is here. She just recently got married to another Navy guy, Gabe. And down here, these are the 6 that are still at home. I have a 14-year-old boy, Andrew, and as Natalie said, she apologized to the party. I'm like, yeah, I need the sympathy. Lydia is 12-year-old, going on 30. Berea is my 21-year-old, and Hazel, 16-year-old, she's a speech student. Chauncey is 20, and my baby, Wesley, is 9 years old. We were Quiverfull. That's how I ended up with 7 children, even though I was convinced from a very young age that I didn't want any kids. I actually had planned to become a nun just because I didn't want to have any kids. And instead, this was my life. Basically, I mean, that's me, and that's what it was like. You know, baby, 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 and there were times when, yes, I came very close. My last child, I actually experienced a partial uterine rupture during the delivery, and believe it or not, I was still so committed to this ideal that I got pregnant twice again, miscarried early both times, but, I mean, I was into the mindset. So I want to, for those who aren't really familiar with Quiverfull, I just want to give a real quick introduction to what that's about. Hopefully you recognize, well maybe not hopefully, you recognize the most famous Quiverfull family, the Duggars, who are on TLC's Way Too Many and Counting. The Duggars are a Quiverfull family, and Quiverfull is based on this verse in Psalm 127, which says, "Lo, children are a heritage of the Lord, the fruit of the womb is his reward, and blessed is the man who has his quiver full of them." I like to define Quiverfull as a very powerful head trip. It's this vision, this all-encompassing vision of a big, happy, godly family. And once you catch that vision, it's like the disconnect from reality sets in immediately, and it infects every aspect of a believer's life. One of the main teaching, of course, is no birth control. We considered ourselves radically pro-life. And so, yeah, even natural family planning, we would say, what's so natural about that? Because, it's during a woman's time of ovulation that she is more interested sexually, and so to then abstain, that's not natural. We had a lot of arguments like that, which I don't know, they made sense at the time. Patriarchy is a huge part of the Quiverfull biblical family values, and it's another part of the head trip, but it was something that was very important. I am not naturally a submissive sort of person, but it's amazing how when you get this infected into your head, you can contort your mind and do some really amazing mental gymnastics to be able to bring that under control and to say, yes, dear. Courtship, did I skip one? Yeah, courtship was another. We would not say that we were into arranged marriages, but that's the basic idea, that the parents are very intimately involved in the meeting and matching of a young couple. The idea is to make a match where the couple, they come from families of similar background and values, and so they're going to continue this lifestyle with their own families. Okay, modesty. That was another big thing. We were taught that you show the slightest amount of skin, then you're defrauding the young men who cannot help but look at you lustfully. Which it was interesting, I was talking to Hina last night, and she says that they have a veil fetish. So you can't win. Yeah, and then I told her about my experience, what I learned about modesty at a strip club, because I went to one after watching Magic Mike. I wasn't that interested in going to see the guys, like my friend and I. Like, we should just go see the girls. We wanted to see the boobs. It was interesting, and now Hina and I are going to work on, you can look for that on Skeptics, because we're going to write something up about that experience. Homeschooling. This was big. I don't know of any Quiverfull families who didn't homeschool. I suppose there are, like in the Catholic community, that they'll go ahead and send their kids to the Catholic schools. But for the most part, it was very important that we homeschool our children because we wanted to train them up in the way they should go, in order to indoctrinate them. I didn't call it indoctrinating, but and the reason, this was our homeschool logo that I made on my computer, and you can see I'm not great at graphic design, but thorn arrows, Christian homeschool, and and we said, we're raising up these arrows for God's army, and we're preparing them. We want them to be sharp, and we want them to be straight. And when the time comes, we're going to shoot them straight into the heart of the enemy, right at the gates of hell. And so I'm a little embarrassed to admit that, but that was me. And the reason that we homeschool, was in that verse, Psalm 127 that I talked to you, blessed is the man who has his quiver full of them. It goes on and it says, they shall not be ashamed, but will speak with the enemy in the gate. And we were told, basically that the city gate, that was where all of the important civic decisions were made. That was basically the seat of power within the community. And so the point of having these, the homeschooling, the training of the children, having many children, was because we intended basically to take over the power centers of government, culture, etc. And this is where we started getting into the postmillennial idea, as opposed to the end times madness, the last days craze. We believed in an eschatology of victory. We believe that Jesus is the King of Kings who reigns from his heavenly throne. And when he returns to earth, it wouldn't be because he wanted to initiate his reign on earth. It was because it was accumulation of his earthly reign, and the way that he rules in society in a global way is through believers. And so we expected that, contrary to the views of dispensationalism, that the gospel of Christ, the Great Commission in Matthew, where Jesus says, go into all the world, make disciples of all nations, we believed that that was going to actually be fulfilled, and that we would, eventually take over and, basically convert the world to Christ. And it's very much a theocratic establishment of the kingdom of God, gradually in history, but eventually we believed it would cover the whole earth. Not sure if any of you are familiar with this dominionism, the cultural mandate, the 7 mountains, as it's called, 7 mountains mandate, in which believers are encouraged to go into all of these areas of influence, governmental, media, business, and, basically to start implementing the law of God within those structures. So we weren't looking to escape in the rapture. We were looking to basically dominate and to fulfill that Genesis mandate, where God said to be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. That was our goal. And Christian Reconstructionism, the theonomy, that is the idea that in the Bible God provides the basis of both personal and social ethics. And so there was very much the idea that we were going to establish biblical law and that would be incorporated as it's all-encompassing Christian worldview in every area of life. And here's how we plan to do it. These families, and this comes from Doug Phillips, who is one of the lead patriarchs within the Quiverfull community. He encourages Quiverfull families to develop a 200-year plan in which, if you have 12 kids and they each have 12 kids, it starts to add up. It starts to multiply. So yeah, Doug Phillips, I went on his website and I looked under his 200-year plan and just basically pulled his notes as far as what his intention of how we are going to go about taking over the world. He has the 7 secrets of successful multi-generational visionaries. And he says the highest rank a soldier of Christ can aspire to is that of general. The general is the global leader who plans long-term strategies of cultural conquest and church expansion on an international level, inspiring all soldiers to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bonds of peace, advancing and protecting the vision of international dominion. So part of his long-term strategy is to control the key resources and assets for gospel warfare. And the militaristic language, they don't even apologize for that. It's holy war. And, our children, they're the arrows, which you think about that, it's like, that's the ammunition. And I did not, I know it sounds crazy, but when I was doing it, it didn't sound offensive or psycho to me. Part of the plan is to have a radical population gap between the unbelieving world and the Christian community. So basically, just by sheer outnumbering. The Christian community, according to Doug Phillips' plan, needs to be the breadbasket, the caretaker, the employer of the land. So again, going into every sphere of influence and basically getting a stranglehold and saying, if you want to, talk about Catholic hospitals or, taking over the healthcare, whatever institution, whatever way that they can get in and say, we need to go by what the Bible says. And, democracy, okay, so long as you're all Christians and you're all going to vote the way that, the Bible tells you to. The end of government education is another part of that plan. Every family will homeschool or participate in a private Christian charter school. And he also mentions the restoration of biblical manhood and womanhood. And I promised Natalie that she came. I have a truly horrifying video. It's just a little YouTube clip, but be prepared to want to lose your cookies here.
Hello, this is Julia Ann for Everyday News. I'd like to introduce you to a brand new baby girl. I am here with Maria Rose. We just had a brand new baby girl. Please come inside and meet her. This is my brand new baby sister, Sophia Grace. She's less than 1 week old. Babies are such a blessing from the Lord. The Bible says in Psalm 127, "Behold, children are a gift of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are children of one's youth. How blessed is a man whose quiver is full of them." Now Adam Robert will explain the importance of having many children over 10 generations. If you only have one child for 10 generations, it will be 10. If you have 2 children per generation, you'll have 100. But if you have 10 children for 10 generations, you'll have 10 billion children. The Bible tells us to be fruitful and multiply. Children are a blessing from the Lord, and I would love if God would bless me with many children, too. Right, Sophia? This is Julia Ann and Sophia Grace for Everyday News.
Nice. So, this is Quiverfull. That's what I lived for 25 years. I was very dedicated, very devoted. And I want to talk just a little bit about how far, because we were always talking about going back to patriarchy, back to the Bible, back to the old paths. And I just want to talk a little bit about how far back the Dominionists want to take us. And of course, with the U.S. elections, we already know about the rape guys. We know, it's just crazy the stuff that they're coming up with. And I didn't have to really dig too far to find some of these guys. This is the website, Phil Kaiser of Dominion Covenant Church in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm from Nebraska. I actually talked to this guy when I was getting out. At that time, my oldest daughter, was going through some very real struggles as a result of being raised in this lifestyle, and we considered her rebellious. because for some reason she just couldn't accept this life that we had prepackaged and handed to her and said this is what it's going to be like. And his advice to me was, basically you just need to shun her. You need to put her out and let her, let the devil take over and teach her, like the prodigal son, and then she'll come crawling home to you. But here he's talking about universal suffrage, and he says that the leadership of the father as the representative of his family within the church is completely removed when he no longer casts the only vote for his family. So, and it's interesting because I was talking to a reporter in Sacramento, and she goes, "Do you think that there would be anyone like that around here?" And I sent her to a website where she could look, and she found a pastor who was willing to go on record and say, yes, we believe that women should not have the right to vote. This is John Hubbard, a Republican member of the Arkansas House of Representatives, and he's written a book in which he says slavery was a blessing for African Americans. And he says the institution of slavery that the black race has long believed to be an abomination upon its people may actually have been a blessing in disguise. The blacks who could endure these conditions and circumstances would someday be rewarded with citizenship in the greatest nation ever established on the face of the earth. This guy, Charles Fuqua, he wrote God's Law, the Only Political Solution, a prophecy of the downfall of the United States, or a blueprint for national prosperity. So he's saying either the U.S. is going hell in a handbasket, or we're going to take over, implement our theonomy, and save everything. He was a Republican candidate for the Arkansas House of Representatives. Did not make it, so... But he wrote in his book, he said, a child who disrespects his parents must be permanently removed from society in a way that gives an example to all other children of the importance of respect for parents. The death penalty for rebellious children is not something to be taken lightly. He says the biblical passages that he cites do not give parents blanket authority to kill their children. They must follow proper procedure in order to have the death penalty executed against their children. And even though this procedure would rarely be used, if it were the law of the land, it would give parents authority. Children would know that their parents had authority, and it would be a tremendous incentive for children to give proper respect to their parents. So when you look at the demographic data relating to religiosity, there's a global level positive correlation between the frequency of parental worship attendance and the number of offspring. Those who never attend religious services, on the average, worldwide average, bear about 1.67 children per lifetime. Those who attend once per month, the average goes up to 2.01. And those who go more than once a week have, on average, 2.5 children. Homeschool families have an average of 4 children. Quiverfull families are deliberately trying for a dozen or more, as you saw in the little freaky video. And these numbers add up exponentially. And for those who are curious but too polite to ask what it's like for the women who are breeding like rabbits, I have a little story. A guy bunny meets a lady bunny in the field, and he says, "This won't take long, did it?" I told you I know jokes. Okay, that was bad. Yeah, I told you about that website where you can go and find Quiverfull families. And I looked, and this is where the Grace Baptist Church in Alliston, Ontario. The National Center for Family Integrated Churches is basically a listing. Family integrated is like code words for Quiverfull. And I actually found a group here in Ottawa, which currently only consists of 2 families. No saying how many kids there are involved in that. When we were in a home church, we had 4 couples, so 8 adults. We had a total of 36 children. So I had the least number. I felt apologetic, like I had to explain I have health issues that, kind of made it difficult for me to just pop them out. So this Quiverfull, the obvious question is like how common is this? And I want to say that, there hasn't been any real number being able to, it's really kind of hard to pin down, because most families, if you ask them, are you Quiverfull, they're like, no. Do you trust the Lord with your family planning? Do you eschew all birth control? Well, yeah. So it's kind of hard to pin it down, but especially within the American evangelical community, I think that what I'm seeing is that mainstream Christianity, because of the internet, because of the activism online, trying to expose some of this, just the craziness of the Bible and all, I'm seeing that a lot of the Christians, they're either going more toward the liberal, emergent, Rob Bell, Brian McLaren kind of thing, or they're reacting. And they're saying, they're going to dig in their heels, they're going to stick to their Bible, they're going to defend, stick up for the Savior. And so then they're going to go more towards this fundamentalism. And a lot of times, because they're perceiving themselves as so persecuted, we've got this, we've got Obama in office. I actually know a couple in my town who have plans to move to Argentina since Obama. I don't have to explain that. I don't really know why, but yeah. But one of the things that they'll do, because they think that we're in the end times, we're, we've got all this secular humanism that's just taking over. The gays are taking over. The atheists are taking over. The feminists are taking over. And so what they do, in order to protect their children from that, is they start homeschooling. And when you get into that homeschool community, that's where you're going to encounter the Quiverfull teachings. If you go to a homeschool convention, it's a really an interesting spectacle, because when you see it, there's, they have the convention, they have the vendor hall, and they will have booths, with mathematics curriculum or with spelling. They have your creation science materials. They have your wall builders, so you can buy all of your revisionist history by Dave Barton. And people will go and they'll pick up their curriculum. But the booths that are, where everybody is gathered, where they're taking out their checkbooks and where they are just loading up on the materials, is these booths where they're like Vision Forum, where they are selling a lifestyle. They're selling biblical family values and basically patriarchy and Quiverfull. And you can go to the workshops, and there might be one, how to teach calculus to your teenager, and there'll be a couple parents, the nerdy ones are in there. But the ones that are packed, and where they're taking notes and they are soaking it all in, are the ones that have titles like How a Woman Can Use Reverence to Build or Save Her Marriage. Why Satan Wants Your Firstborn. That was it. I'm serious. These are where the parents are congregating and where they're learning these and soaking up the ideas. So once you get into the homeschooling, that's where it's really growing, and it's kind of scary. If you go to that National Center for Family Integrated churches and you look at where, like, they're everywhere. I don't want to be all paranoid, but actually, I found some in Ottawa. they're around. So this is my post-Quiverfull family. I had an opportunity to engage in a email correspondence with my atheist uncle, who I hadn't known, as just kind of circumstances led, and met this uncle who I was warned. He said, stay away from Uncle Ron because he's really tricky and he'll confuse you. And for some reason I was just drawn to that. by the time I got home from this family vacation, I had an email. He says, I really appreciated, getting to talk to you. I wonder if you'd, be interested in an exchange of an email or two. Well, it became this obsession. Over a year's time, we wrote back and forth like 1,000 emails. It was crazy, but it was an opportunity for me to actually start reevaluating, like kind of stepping outside and looking again at everything that I believed, why I believed it, what I was doing. And it came to the point where I just didn't believe it anymore. And major upsetting of the apple cart in my life. I divorced my patriarchal husband, put my kids in public school, and started the website No Longer Quivering, where I just wanted to write about my experience, and it's been amazing, the response, because I didn't think anybody, would pay that much attention, but actually, because Quiverfull, I say that it's regular Christianity taken to its logical conclusion. It's like, that's evangelicalism writ large. And when people start looking at it and they see the extreme, it makes it a lot easier for them to see where these ideals are actually affecting, to a lesser degree, but still it's affecting everyone. And so there's been a tremendous response to that. And yeah, they did dye their hair green. I went to school like that. This is my daughter Lydia. She's at the mall T-bowing. I had to put that one in there. She goes, I don't know why all little ladies were giving me these looks. and asked me with my flying spaghetti monster hat. We live in a very small, very, very conservative town. And so I wasn't really too surprised when one morning I got up and there was a scarlet A for atheist painted on my front door in silly string. It's like, well, should I be threatened by that? I don't know. But my daughter Hazel, she says, I need some more silly string. So we went to the store and she bought the silly string and she turned it into an atheist girl. And if you look close, she's like giving them the finger. So yeah, things are different. Things are different in our world. And that's it. If you more information, No Longer Quivering is my website. If you like Twitter drama, you can follow me because I love getting into it with the true Christians. They come and, tell me how I'm going to hell. So, and, if they get real crazy, all I have to do is retweet their bullshit. And like all of my atheist friends just go get them. It's fun. So, and we have time for questions, right?
Hi, Vyckie. So, I have two. One of them is going to be really passive. How the hell do you afford to have 12 kids? Because I can barely pay for myself. That's one. But the question that I'm actually more interested in, looking at these photos and looking at the sort of promotional materials and the websites and everything, I'm noticing how monochromatic the group is. And I'm wondering whether that's just an accident of demographics in terms of where the strongholds of these movements are, or is there a racial component? Is there
There definitely is a racial component. Although there is a new rising star in the Quiverfull movement, Vyckie Bachman, who is a black man. And he is one of the most psycho of them all. He has a YouTube video series on biblical womanhood, and I think it's like part 6, where he talks about that a man, when he reaches his 40s, he has this craving for the attention of young women, and he says, but God anticipated that need, and He provided for it by placing teenage daughters in His home. He said that, and then he says, when these girls are distracted, when they are doing their own thing, having boyfriends, going to college, whatever, and they're not there to pay daddy the attention that he really needs, don't be surprised when he's having an affair with the secretary. he has not taken that video down. It's there, and he hasn't apologized for it, so. Yeah.
Jesus Christ! Awesome.
And as far as affording it, I mean, you don't afford it.
That's handy.
You just, you know. But of course, we justify that. We're like, well, you know, it's a lot more efficient if your kids only have 2 sets of clothes anyway. Or, you know, whatever. Yeah, not everybody gets a reality TV program where they get a house built for them.
Hi, I'm just curious with the homeschooling, but also with the aspect of social control you were talking about, you know, the different levels, and then the end of times kind of moment where the control will be in the hands of a huge family.
Mm-hmm.
What's the diversity of employment in that group, especially with the homeschooling and the post-secondary type of aspect to it? Are there a lot of engineers or a lot of doctors? I know, like, the medicine-wise, I'm guessing it's not that, you know, crazy medicine, like the full-on medicine.
Among the religiously motivated homeschoolers, I did know some who were really serious about the academic aspect of homeschooling, and they did an excellent job of teaching, but there were very, very few. I remember going to a conference by Mary Pride, who was one of the leaders, one of the founders of the Quiverfull ideal, and where she talked about, you know, it's much more important to instill character into your children. It's much more important that they, you know, have a heart for the Lord and that they're going to follow God, you know, all their days. And she said, as far as the academics, you know, she talked about some study, and I remember this because she said that they did a study where they were, you know, surveying high school students, and the criteria was that they could write one coherent paragraph reasonably free of error. And she said, you know, it was like this really ridiculously low percentage of students, high school students, who could do that. And she said, so if you can top that, you know, if you can homeschool and your kids can come out being able to write one coherent sentence reasonably free of error, then you're doing better than like 95% of the homeschool or the high school, public school kids anyway. And I felt so relieved because, you know, I'm pumping out babies. I could hardly get out of bed.
I'm wondering, what was it that flipped your switch that made you come out?
What really got to me was when I realized that my children were not thriving. I mean, I knew that we were failing them academically. I knew that because of my health was so bad that I could, you know, some days I did not get out of bed. And so I wasn't really training them. I wasn't really supervising them. They had very little opportunities, and I saw that they were discouraged. They were depressed. And when I saw that, you know, that they just, you know, I remember thinking, my kids, you know, supposedly this is this great vision from God, and everything's, you know, they're going to have these really good kids. And I can see that they are not thriving, and that was what made me start rethinking all of it. So I could have dealt with all of the, you know, it's a very demanding lifestyle. It's very much a martyr kind of thing. I could sacrifice myself, obviously, to the point of death, and I did that more than once. But I wasn't willing to sacrifice my children.
I have British relatives who subscribe to what you call Muslim Quiverfull, where they believe you have to have lots of children and take money away from the heathen government for your children. And there's a question I've always wanted to ask one of them, but I realize you might be able to answer it if you don't mind. It's kind of icky. But having that many children probably takes a toll on you. I mean, you talked about having health problems. I don't know if they were related to having that many children. But I mean, how common is things like uterine prolapse or all those kinds of issues that can come up?
It's very common. It's, you know, it definitely destroys a woman's health. And I'm finding that a lot with No Longer Quivering, because we have women. When I first started the website, I didn't think I would meet anybody else who had gotten out. Because the tendency is when you see things that are, you know, not going right, it's just to dig in and try harder, pray more, read your Bible more. And so I wasn't really expecting a lot of people that, you know, to come and read the website and actually listen, but they did. And so we had this community, a support group of former Quiverfull women, and they're all in different stages of the process of getting out. But the health problems are just, yeah, it's tragic to see how their bodies are just ruined by this lifestyle.
Okay, I had an interesting thought when you were talking before about the whole taking over the government and taking over business and getting people in there. And I was just wondering how many of these people actually made the mental connection between we are going to take over business so that we can control everything, and say other things that are part of the Christian ethical policies, such as the mark of the beast. Like, are they realizing that they are creating that?
Yeah, there is so much disconnect, and it's really, it's been like 5 years since I've been out. I used to be able to, explain, interpret, and be like, well, this is what they're thinking, this is where they're coming from. And it's been long enough now that I'm having a hard time remembering how it ever made sense to me. So, I'm losing that talent. I was like, that was crazy. That was crazy.
So, just a quick question here.
Okay.
You were mentioning that I think it was your eldest daughter had issues with Quiver. Quiverfull?
Quiverfull,
okay,
yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, she wanted to have a life.
But when you left, did you take the children? And how did they follow through? How did they deal with it?
It's been interesting. Yeah, I got full custody of all of my kids. My oldest was already out of the home at that time, so it wasn't really as much an effect on her. But the 6 children who were still at home, we kind of went crazy. We went and got a television, and we got all the Harry Potter, we watched all that, this big rebellion. And then I put them in public school, and yeah, they went crazy. My son's got an ear pierced, he was 10. And we just, and my kids are like, fuck, because they can say that. And I'm like, it's been long enough that, they've settled down some, but yeah, they're really, I was amazed at the transition. I was afraid that when they went into public school, especially my son who was 10 at the time, I was afraid that he was just going to go in there and beat everybody up. He was so angry, because his life, he knew that he had no control of his life, that and so I was kind of scared. I told the principal, it's like, I've got 6 kids who have never been in school. They are all way behind. I don't know, they have no social skills. I don't know what's going to happen. But the public school, they were amazing. The principal, he took us in and he, gave us a tour, and my son, he got this teacher who was just amazing. She was so pro Andrew. And she pumped him up, and she encouraged him, and just brought him to life. It was just wonderful to see. So, everything that I was so terrified of, now I'm like, thank God for public schools. Or flying spaghetti monster, whatever.
I just a quick question. I have read that when a female dog has puppies, it takes 6 months off their lifespan or something, and that breeders know this, so they try not to overdo it. But I haven't been able to find anything like that for women. Now, I assume that it's obstetrical knowledge. Have you ever heard of or found anything about that?
Other than anecdotal stories that I could tell you about women who have had their health, ruined. But, and when you talk to Quiverfull families, the women are obsessed with health. They're obsessed with natural foods, whole foods. They have these diet books, and not only do they have to pump out all of these children and homeschool their kids and grind their wheat and make their bread, they have to be thin and happy and project this, this health, because they are obviously hearing that criticism, well, you're going to ruin your health. And so they're like, well, that would be a bad witness for the Lord and for our Quiverfull ideal if I, look like I'm about to die. So yeah, they get kind of obsessed with trying to stay healthy as they can, but of course, eventually it catches up with them.
Do you have a sense through your website or any other source that how many people are able to escape? How many young girls or young boys are able to get out of it?
Well, that's the encouraging thing as far as the kids. They do not have a real good retention rate within Quiverfull, surprisingly. Because the kids, when they do get out, they get a chance to go to college or whatever and start rethinking. There is a gal who came to No Longer Quivering. She goes by Livy Ann. And when she started telling her story, it's wonderful to see them start processing and saying, this is what I was doing, and now I can see why it wasn't working, why I'm so crazy, why I feel such agitation and depression and anxiety. And it's a way to start processing. And this Livy Ann, she became like this blogging rock star. She has her own site now. That is just, it's called Love, Joy, Feminism, if you want to check that out. But she just, it has been a real inspiration for especially the young people who are coming out and saying, what the hell, where do I even go? Because you come out and all of a sudden it's like, you're so culturally illiterate, you have no, people are making references to Doctor Who and you're like, huh? And so it's like you got to play all this catch up, and then you got to, try and figure out what you're going to do now that you can make choices. It's a real, it's a process, but it's an exciting one. It's fun.
What about your husband? Did he just sort of give up willingly and back off? And did the church have issues with both of you?
It was a real, by the time I got to the point where I just really didn't believe it anymore, and I felt like my health was failing to the point that I just, I probably should have been hospitalized. And I said, I just need a break. And my husband, he took the 6 kids to his mom's for a while, just supposedly to give me a break. And he got down there and he started talking to a homeschool or a home church pastor who was very quiverful, very patriarchal. And they just, got to yakking with each other and decided that the problem with our marriage is that I just was not submissive enough, that I wasn't upholding his authority to the children. And so they came up with this scheme that they basically called me and said, if you want to see your kids again, here's this list of things that you need to comply with. And one of them was that I needed to go to counseling with their chosen therapist, who was not even, a therapist. He was this pastor. And I talked to him on the phone, and this guy was bragging to me about how he had counseled this one couple where the husband had committed adultery. The wife could not bring herself to forgive him. And so they could not reconcile, and they were just having this horrible time. And it wasn't until he was able to talk to this woman and convince her that really she just needed to give that to God, let go, forgive her husband, and, apologize to him for having such a hard and stubborn heart. I was like, I'm sorry, I gotta go. and then I told my husband, I said, I'm gonna see my kids. I'm coming tomorrow, and if I don't, because at one point they had, I went to see them, and they had taken my kids, off in the van and wouldn't let me see them. And I said, if I don't see my kids, then Monday morning I'm going to be at the courthouse and I'm going to file for divorce. And that's what ended up happening. So I feel a little bad about that, but it was kind of a desperate matter of survival for me and for my kids.
Somebody asked just about the same question I was going to ask, so I'll sort of expand it a bit. I was going to ask if you knew what the sort of rates of non-compliance were amongst, Quiverfull people, and then, like you, they eventually leave, or the young people don't continue in it. So I see that, like you said, it's quite a large percentage of people don't stay in it once they grow up, which is promising. But what would you estimate is the threat to North America from Quiverfull and other sort of evangelical and fundamentalist Christian organizations? It's
kind of hard to put numbers on it because, like I said, just to be able to define Quiverfull, nobody admits to being Quiverfull. And if you take just the basic teachings, of, you can ask your average evangelical Christian what they believe a biblical family looks like, and they will start listing. They'll have their excuse for why they can't have half a dozen children, but they, if you really push them, they'll say, yeah, if I was really committed, if I was a good Christian, I would get rid of the birth control. Or they'll have their reasons why they can't homeschool their kids. I have to send my kids to public school because thus and thus. But if you really push them, they'll be like, well, yeah, if I was a good Christian, I would homeschool my kids. Or they'll say, my wife has to work because of the health insurance or whatever. But, they'll apologize for it because they don't think it's right. So I think that the ideals are there because it's biblical. It's biblical, and that's what the Christianity is based on.
I'm curious if there's a denominational aspect to this. Like, I've run across very similar ideals, I guess, in a number of different sort of Christian sects, so to speak. Pentecostals communities are very much along those lines. I was wondering if there's sort of a firm a section of Christianity that's very much into this as opposed to others.
I find that it's very widespread. Definitely the fundamental Baptist churches are going to be more heavily that way. The Reformed Calvinistic kind of churches, they really lean that way. But, even some of the supposedly hip liberal, you got Mark Driscoll. So yeah, it does kind of, you can find Quiverfull families in any church, community, regardless of denomination.
Great, thanks. About that psalm, you notice it says, "Blessed is the man," not "Blessed is the." He's got, don't say a word about the women. Think about.
Exactly. And then I didn't figure that out until later after I got it. I was like, what the hell? It made me mad.
But I was wondering, are there men in this movement who just say, okay, that's it, this has been stupid, it's killing my wife? Are there men who leave?
We don't get a lot of them at No Longer Quivering. Generally what I find, and especially as I talk to women who are getting out, who have been in these, really the relationships, whenever you've got that hierarchy and the patriarchy, they deteriorate to the point of abuse. But what I'm finding just by talking with these women is that the men who already have kind of an egalitarian, healthy attitude towards relationships, towards gender relations and that kind of thing, when they're presented with these ideas of submission and they're not interested. They basically say, I want a partner. I want somebody who can think, who can, challenge me, whatever. I don't want a doormat. And they don't go for it. It's the men who already have that tendency towards micromanaging, towards control, towards, abusive style of dominating relationships. They latch onto it and they go for it because now they have biblical sanction for those tendencies.
Are there men who just say, stuff all this, and they leave and abandon? What? Is there a number of cases of those?
Yeah, I haven't heard of very many cases of that, no.
I'm interested in hearing just exactly what biblical examples, because you say they can justify this lifestyle because it's biblical. But I remember when I was still Christian and I was looking into the Bible for examples of a good marriage. Geez, you can't find one. Like, there's concubines and David is the beloved. But what does he do to women? He goes and he kills the husband of one to get the woman. And I couldn't find a good example that can translate to modern times. So I was wondering if you had actually something that the Quiverfull movement latches onto in the Bible as a good husband and wife combo. They're so literalistic about their approach. Basically, if it's in the Bible, it's biblical.
And so, you know, even people will say, you know, well, polygamy is in the Bible. And there are some, you know, Quiverfull families who are like, that's true. And so there's a website, I think it's a Facebook page called Biblical Families, where this home church community is implementing polygamy into their practice of biblical family values. So basically, even though it's a bad example, and you could say, you know, that looks, you know, like, but that's biblical. And so they will accept those bad relationships for themselves because, you know, yeah, David, he was a man after God's own heart. So.
Yeah, less a question and more comment on the last question, but Fred Clark over at Slacktivist, after the whole Chick-fil-A, you know, we support biblical families bit, he's been spending the last several weeks listing, you know, these are what real biblical families look like, and quoting chapter and verse. And yeah, people have been pretty horrified by a lot of them.
Which is why when you're in that situation and your marriage starts to kind of devolve and you know, it's starting to really suck, you don't really question it because, I mean, you got examples there where it sucked and obviously God, you know, approved. So.